Hi, this is Corey Johnston, and today's lesson is going to take place in the 13th chapter of Paul's first epistle to the Corinthians. This is the famous love chapter. There are three parts as we see it. The first of which, the first three verses, speaks of the spiritual superiority and supremacy of love as a gift, and this connects to the 12th chapter. The verses 4 through 7 are a definition of love, what it is, what it isn't, what it does not do, and verses 8 through 13 speak on the eternality, the eternal element of love, its eternal dimensions. But the 12th chapter, Paul introduces the theme of spiritual gifts, which bleeds into the 13th. They are the multitude and diverse gifts, as such as they are. They all emanate from a singular entity, that is the Ruach Kadesh, who sovereignly selects. He distributes the gifts according to his strategic and wise designs. And then in the second part of this chapter, verses 12 through 31, he illustrates the famous metaphor as the church of a body, and the concept of plurality and unity echoes and abounds. 12th verse, for as the body is one and has many members, but all the members of that body, being many, are one body, so also is Messiah. The body, now each individual member is likened to a body member. Another way of saying appendages is members of bodies. So all these bodily parts that we have are part of they are individual, yet they are collective. They are conjoined to the same person and serve the same different functions in service of the same integral being, and we are to be like-minded in our service to the church. For indeed the body is not one member, but many. Verse 14, again, the concept of plurality and unity. There are individuals within the collective, and we have to stay closely connected to the collective, much as disparate body parts. If a finger is detached, and removed from a body, then it's not going to be as functional as having 5 fingers. And then he just compares these conversations between the disparate body parts, the foot and the ears. They are all uniquely designed to fulfill a function that they can uniquely fulfill. And for the foot to ask the ear to do what it does is the height of folly, because the ear can only do what the foot cannot do, and every other member of the body. And he also uses eyes. But verse 18 through 20, but now Elohim has put the members, each one of them, in the body, even as he is pleased. This is now the distribution of the gifts are for a sovereign purpose, and he sovereignly distributes them strategically, but each member who has gifts is also placed in that church for the reason. And the church's job, the minister's job, the pastor's job, is to connect the puzzle pieces together. Each individual gifted members is an item of information that is likened to a puzzle piece, and you have to connect them together to make the church flourish and function to its maximum potential. And if they had all been one member, where would the body be? If the body was just the hand or the stomach or anything else, it would not be a body. It would just be that. So there's no such thing as an isolated stomach. You don't see stomachs or hands or eyes floating around. You see them attached to bodies. And now there are indeed many members, but only one body. Once more, the concept of plurality and unity. The body has a multitude of members, each of which are designed to perform certain functions that they can uniquely do. The ear cannot see, the eyes cannot hear, and vice versa, et al., etc. So these individual and disparate members are in fact belong to a collective. So there is so all the multitudes and diversities of the bodily appendages or members are connected to one entity. And he also verse 25, that there should be no division in the body, but that the members should have the same concern one for another. And if one member suffers, all the members suffer with it. Or if one member is esteemed, all the members rejoice in it. The sensation of pleasure or pain in any individual member of the body can affect the whole body. So if your finger has been burned, your whole body's going to hurt. The same person is going to suffer. All the bodily members are going to join it, even though it is not as immediately afflicted by the fire. So we have to have the same concern not only for ourselves, but also for others. We are individuals in collective environments, and we must be communally minded and oriented in service of others. So love is the greatest gift. Love is the glue which keeps the church connected and keeps it all together and keeps it united. And he's speaking against there being no division in the body. So argumentativeness and schisms and heresies have the divisive quality, and they destroy the unity. So we all have to have the same mind, same focus, same agenda, same goal, same master. And you are a body of Messiah and members individually. So the body of the Messiah is it is bigger than any one of its members, any one of its congregants, any individual person in it. We belong to a body of other believers, and as such, we have to stay closely connected, as do our bodily appendage, to the same, even as we go all the way across the world. Now, the body of the Messiah is not only universal across the world, but is also universal in time. We are connected. The author of Hebrews eloquently states our connection to the ones who have carried the torch before us in 12:1 of that book. But earnestly seek the better gifts, and yet I shall show you a more excellent way. The Corinthian Christians, they were a spiritually gifted assembly. They had no shortage of spiritual giftedness, yet they were not functioning and flourishing as well as they could because they exercised them in a spirit of selfishness, and selfishness is devoid of love, as we're soon going to read. And love, as he points out, is the preeminent gift above and beyond everything else. First thing above all, seek love, because all these other gifts are futile and vain and meaningless if they are not performed in love. 13th chapter, first verse. If I speak with the tongues of men and of angels, but do not have love, I have become as sounding brass or a clanging cymbals. One of the gifts that the Corinthian Christians had was the gift of tongues. This would have been functionally and utilitarianly essential in the pre-Rosetta age stone. So the visitation of the tongues was the manifestation of the promised Spirit at Pentecost, and the Jews were gathered from all across the diaspora to Jerusalem. Pentecost was one of the 3 holidays that they were commanded to gather as one, and the locations, the diversities are alluded to in the 9th through 11th chapter verse of the 2nd chapter of Acts. And because they spoke all these languages, the Spirit came, visited, and indwelled them. People who had no were not fluent in language suddenly became fluent, and they spoke the language of the Spirit in the language that could be heard. And this was essential because the church was pan-national since its inception, and one of the divisions and barriers would have been the language one, but the Spirit broke that down, thus enabling Christianity to travel faster and flourishing. But the Corinthians, they had an inflated estimation of the significance of the gift of tongues. Paul deflates its significance in contrast to the superior gift of prophecy in the first 25 verses, especially in the 14th verse. But many of them, inflated it so much they must have considered it the language of angels. But another way of considering the inclusion of angels in the speaking of tongues is that Paul uses hyperbole. He does so 3 times in the 2nd verses. So the language of angels would be unutterable and incomprehensible, but any speaking of tongue, or even being able to communicate with angels without love, it's all bankrupt, it's all meaningless, it's all futile, it's all vain. You are likened to something that is making a noise without harmony, without symphony, just a bashing musical instrument, an obnoxious one that just makes a noise, but no love behind the music and no love in the activity. And if I have prophecy and know all secrets and all knowledge, and if I have all faith so as to remove mountains, but do not have love, I am not. So the hyperbole, once more, is in the all knowledge. We are not omniscient beings. We have limited knowledge, finite cognitive capacities. So to claim to be all knowledge. And the other one is to remove mountains. That's something that even the Savior didn't do, but he promised us that if our faith was strong enough and the necessity of the occasion demanded it, this is an unlikely hypothetical, we could remove mountains. We could pick it up by our eyes with our faith, the eyes of faith, and move it over to one place to a next. But even if you could do that, if it was not motivated, rooted in, and done in love, And if you have this tremendous faith in prophecy, bully for you, but what does it mean to anyone else if you do not have love in the love's superiority over knowledge is enumerated in the first verse of the 8th chapter of this book. So the qualities and effects of it is that knowledge tends to puff up. It makes the knowledgeable one pride, but love edifies. So no one, if you are a minister, no one cares how much you know. They need to know how much you care. Because it's all useless and you are nothing. Even if you can do all these fantastic miracles, it's all for nothing, and you have no worth if you do not have love. And if I give out all my possessions to feed the poor, and if I give my body to be burned, but do not have love, it does not profit me at all. So it's almost inconceivable to even imagine one who could just be so generous and charitable as to bankrupt himself in the pursuit of giving alms and not have love, or to willfully surrender their body to be burned at the stake. This would have been the common fate of Christian martyrs, especially since Constantine eliminated the cross as an instrument of capital punishment throughout the ages. But this would have been something even early Christians did, and it's inconceivable to do that without love. But Paul's saying, even if you did all these things and did not have love, it would not be, bully for the poor, but nothing for you because you didn't do it in love. And if you gave your body to be burned and it was not for the love of the faith, not for the love of something greater than yourself, then you're just that's just a suicidal act. It's not a martyrdom if it's not in love, and it does not profit. It does not benefit you and not anyone else at all. So love is what gives meaning, substance, and significance to everything we do. Every gift we exercise, every interaction we make, it has to be in love. Love is patient, is kind. Love does not envy. Love does not boast. It is not puffed up. This marks the second distinct turning point, narrative transition that I alluded to earlier. So what we just read was the expression of the supremacy and superiority of love to all the other gifts, speaking of tongues, prophecy, knowledge, faith, all these things, self-sacrifice, alms, unlimited alms are nothing compared to love, and they are nothing without love. Now he breaks into the definition. He describes things that love is, things that love isn't. So they're all, he describes what it is and what it does not do in the 4th verse. It is patient. So love, the best things. Now this chapter is unfortunately divorced from his context, and one of the ways that we read this is that it is read at wedding occasions. This is the great chapter in love. And of course, a married couple does need to be patient with each other, but who among us is really patient to fall in love? The Greeks have a richer diversity of language and terminology for our love, where we use the word almost indiscriminately to describe our whims, passions. The Greeks had specific words for specific types of love. The love that he speaks of here is agape love. This is the love so profound that the Greeks had to actually invent a word to describe it. So it is not eros love. That would have been the married love, and we've unfortunately bastardized that word into the English language, into erotica, but in its original pristine Greek, it does entail the emotional and not just physical and carnal elements of love. But love is also kind. That is self-evident. If you are kind, you will be loving. If you are not kind, you are not loving. And if you are not loving, you will not be kind. Kindness is just being friendly, sincere, genuine, and nice to any and all in your path. And envy is one of the 7 deadly sins. Envy, now jealousy is not necessarily sinful. Yahweh himself is described as a jealous El who tolerates no rivals. But also it's not unrighteous for a married couple to be jealous over their mutual possessions and mutual exclusivity. But envy is always invariably rooted in a negative and sinful origin. Love doesn't boast because it's not conceited. It's not so full of itself that it needs to make it's content to remain quiet and know that it is, and have the serenity and calmness of the assurance that it is love and does not need to boast. And it does not puff up. It does not inflate one's ego. It does not raise one's pride. It does not make them seem more important to the point of debasing everyone else as less than them. Does not behave indecently, does not seek its own, is not provoked, reckons not the evil. Indecent behavior, this is just indiscreet, inexcusable public behavior. So the Corinthians, they lived in a sexually licentious culture, to say the least. In fact, the term to be a Corinthian in the age was synonymous with being a fornicator. So there was all sorts of indecent behavior in public, just rioting, drunken revelry, all these things. But that's not something that people love do. That's something selfish people do. They drink, beyond what is necessary, just for their own satisfaction and delight. But love is not self-seeking. Now, the path of discipleship is one of self-denial. If any man call himself my disciple, let him deny himself, take up his cross daily, and then follow me. So we forsake our own selfish interests. We forsake our own immediate gratification. It's no longer about us. When you love, you will not love yourself above enough to prioritize your needs, interests, wants, and desires above those of others. It is not provoked. It does not, even when it's slapped in the face, they will say, I got another cheek, turn the other cheek. That's what love does when someone, but provocation is not limited to a physical variety. There are also verbal provocations. There are provocations of many other natures, but love doesn't delight in the confrontation or just establishing its dominance or superiority over others. It does not retaliate instinctively with a retaliatory response. It seeks not vengeance. It is not evenly provoked, and it reckons not the evil. The loving person will seed justice. They will not seek justice, but they will seek vengeance, but they will cede vengeance to Yahweh. And that's where the patience comes in, because in his own way, in his own time, it might not even come in this life, in the reckoning, but in the life after it will certainly come. So we don't need to reckon the evil that is done for us. We can, just instantly forgive and just not, try and settle the score, repay the evil, seek the vengeance. An eye for an eye makes the whole world blind. Mahatma Gandhi, a profound thinker, not of our faith, but valid nevertheless. Does not rejoice over unrighteousness, but rejoices in the truth. What one rejoices in is testament and character, also what one mourns over in the same token. So, when love sees, wicked, lewd, and indecent behavior, parties, fun, all these things, it does not rejoice in that. It does not delight in it. It does not approve in it, but rather rejoices and approves of the truth. So love is the language of truth. And if we speak the truth in love, Ephesians 4:15. So it's it's not enough that we speak the truth, how we speak the truth. And there are, the acronym of think before you speak is applicable here. THINK, think. Is it truthful? Is it helpful? Is it inspiring? Is it necessary? Is it kind? And these are the standards which ought to govern our speech. It covers all, believes all, expects all, endures all. Covering speaks of forgiveness. Forgiveness is an act of love to just not press the insult or the injury inflicted upon us, not to use it as leverage against someone, but just to really cover it, get it under the bridge, under the water. You have to make them know that you've forgiven them in order for them to appreciate. But love believes all. Now, the belief that we are called to is not a blind faith, but we have to exercise discrimination. But we believe all that is written in this book when we love it in the author, and it expects all, it hopes all its promises. It knows that his promises are ironclad and is better than gold and as sure as already an accomplished fact. What he promises is already in existence from his panoramic omniscience across the space-time continuum. And it endures all. It endures pain, separation, slights and everything else, every vicissitude and infirmity and insult and affliction that the world has to offer. We endure it all. And the love is the engine which sustains the willful endurance of all the hatred and everything else and the hostility that is inflicted in our way. So the world is a culture of hate, and they hate us, and we love them, and we are trying to save them. So we cannot treat them as enemies, even though they treat us as their enemies. Love never fails, and whether prophecy they shall be inactive, or tongues they shall cease, or knowledge it shall be inactive. So prophecy, tongues, and knowledge, once more, these three gifts repeat themselves. These all have definite dates of expiration and the consummation of human history. Prophecy, tongues, and knowledge are no longer going to be necessary, but love will endure beyond the grave. It sustains itself above and beyond the life that we have now, and it is the governing law of the afterlife in heaven, and it never fails. No wrong can come from loving anyone or loving... but you want to love the right people and the right things, but love itself will never fail. Prophecy, there is authentic prophecy. There is also false prophecy, and one of the waves we most recently witnessed is in reference to the coronavirus. All these charismatic Christians who are saying that it will pass by Eastern season. Here we are still, and why should we trust anyone who has sudden supernatural insight on something they couldn't predict to begin with? I've also heard some other ludicrous theories, like the coronavirus is the fourth seal of the 6th chapter in the book of Revelations. My question is, where are the other threes? There's an order to prophecy. So be aware of the pretenders, but there is, follow the authentic article. Tongues, they are still in operation. The Pentecostal churches, they are continuationalist, which means they revive many of the practice which were lost and lapsed since the apostolic era. Tongues are certainly no longer utilitarianly or functionally as essential as they once were, but they're still operated. But there will come a day when they are no longer needed, because we will all speak the same language in heaven, and it is a language of love. And knowledge, we cannot... that has a definite data. Our knowledge is equally limited, but love is unlimited, eternal in dimension, all-encompassing in scope. And knowledge, one day, all the knowledge that we acquire and accumulate is going to leave us. And that's that. For we know in part, and we prophesy in part. So these are partial gifts. We do not have all knowledge, as Paul hyperbolically wrote in the second verse. But, we know what we know, and we should know as much as we know without claiming to know that we know all there is. And prophecy is limited. The prophet cannot speak anything that Yahweh does not deign to reveal to himself. So each prophecy is not the some encapsulation of prophecy. It is not prophecy in the whole. These gifts are partial, but love is indivisible, unbreakable, eternal, and permanent. When that which is perfect has come, then that which is in part shall be inactive. So when that which is imperfect, and the consummation of human history, the new heaven, the new earth, the new Jerusalem, all that is imperfect will be renewed into something that is perfect. Our bodies that we now have, we will receive our perfect, resurrected bodies, which are designed to withstand an eternity. And the earth, the entire earth, which awaits and groans for redemption in the 8th chapter of Romans, will be perfected and pristine and as it once was. And on that day when the New Jerusalem descends from the heavens onto the earth, and the old earth burns in fire, 2 Peter 3, then everything that was partial, we already read what was in part, knowledge and prophesy will cease. They will be inactive, they will be inoperative, they will be no longer necessary or needed. When I was a child, I spoke as a child, I thought as a child, I reasoned as a child, but when I became a man, I did away with childish matters. The Corinthians were not a spiritually mature, they were a spiritually gifted assembly, but they were not a spiritually mature one. Paul addresses this as early as the 3rd chapter. He says, I have nuggets of revelation that I would love to share with you, but I can only feed you the milk because you are so unadvanced that I can only feed you the basics. But childish, now we are called to cultivate a childlike spirit as a necessary prerequisite for our access into the abode of heaven in places such as Mark's 9th and 10th chapter. But we are to cultivate the virtues of childlikeness. This is the innocence, simplicity, just the tremendous amount of faith that we have, just the artless trust and artless belief. But we are to eschew the vices of childishness, which are immaturity, just not acting less than your age. We have to function in the adult world and one of the ways that when I was a baby believer, I had, as I've matured spiritually, I've learned to believe not what I wish were true, but what is actually true. A lot of people believe all these, in the political process. Just look at all those people who believed, Justice Kavanaugh's accuser. They didn't really believe it. They just wanted to believe it because their hatred for the conservative movement is so destructive that they don't even care or calculate any of that. They are not motivated by love. But now that becoming a man, you have to do away, put away, eliminate, and expel and exit from the childish thinking, the immature manner with which you approach life, and embrace the duties and responsibilities that accompany your maturation and progressive sanctification. For now we see in the mirror dimly, but then face to face. Now I know in part, but then I shall know, as I also have been known. Mirrors in the ancient world would have been primarily on bronze, and the reflection they emitted would have been hazier and more disfigured and more streaky and less, than the mirrors that we now know. So one could only see dimly, and he's using this as what we will see, who we will see rather in a mirror dimly now is God. He does leave reflections and revelations of himself, but we will see him face to face in the afterlife. And we have to cultivate the practice and priority of love if we expect to make it to see his face. And he once says that I know in part Paul had tremendous knowledge. He was privy to the mysteries of revelation that saints of a prior dispensation would have killed to have. But his knowledge was ultimately partial. But the one thing he does know is that love is eternal and heaven is real. And now faith, hope, and love remain, these three, but the greatest of these is love. So prophecy, tongues, and knowledge are limited. They are one day bound to cease and be inactive and inoperative. But these are the three elements of endurance: faith, expectation, and love. They connect us to the eternal. They are eternal in themselves. So the faith that we have is for something that is future and everlasting. So is the hope. And love, for reasons we've already detailed in this chapter, is eternal and unceasing and unbinding and without limit and without end. But of all these three elements, more meaningful than faith and hope is love. So love is the primary priority, the primary pursuit, the number one gift, without which our entire Christian lives are meaningless, empty, and futile. So it's not, it seems almost platitudinous to stress the axiomatic assumption that we are to love, but we have to do it because we do need reminders to love in the way that we are called to love. That's all the time we have for today. Thank you so much. I'm so glad you're here. Stay tuned until next time. I'll see you then. Bye-bye.